Mhm.
Hi, good morning. Excuse me. We're still waiting on Arturo to sign on, but I just tried to give him a phone call and he didn't pick up. So hopefully that means he's logging in right now. But we'll go ahead and get started with the three artists who are here right now. I'm Holly Ittle. I'm the Exhibitions and Quilt National Director here at the Dairy Barn. Quilt National only has about 2 more weeks left in the gallery before it comes down. So if you have the chance to travel to Athens, I recommend you do so by September 6th. We'll also be having a closing reception on Friday, September 3rd here at the Dairy Barn, and a Quilt National Artist reunion on the 4th off campus, but in Athens. So if you can travel safely here, we look forward to seeing you in a few weeks. Today we have Helen Geglio, Linda Kim, Arturo Sandoval, and Susan Shie. If each of you could please say hello and introduce yourself, that would be great.
Hi, I'm Helen Geglio. I live in South Bend, Indiana, and a nice hot Indiana day.
Hi, I'm Linda M. Kim, and I'm in Austin, Texas, and it's really, really hot and humid here too.
Hi, I'm Susan Shie, and I live in Worcester, Ohio, which is about 3 hours away from Athens. And it's nice here today, but I had to water my flowers because after we had all the rain that the Californians and Oregonians and Washingtonians should have gotten, now it's all of a sudden dry.
It was really foggy here this morning.
Hmm.
We'll see if it gets hot. I'm going to pause the screen sharing just so I can make this less of not an automatic presentation. Oh, sorry.
Susan, you must have had a chance to see the exhibit if you're so close, right?
Not yet.
Oh, okay.
I'm legally blind and I don't drive.
Okay.
So, and I have had a hard time getting down there, but my friends surprised me, and 4 of my girlfriends are going with me down to Quilt National for the closing weekend.
Great. I'm going to be there too.
Me too.
Good.
Hey.
Did you go
Really
before?
interesting.
You didn't go before, right?
I've never.
Oh, never? Oh, you're gonna love it.
Never. Yeah, it's Texas is far and yeah.
Yeah, I
It's
know.
fun.
I'm really fortunate to be so close. And my husband and I used to have a housemate. So we have all these pets, and we could always go and teach places all over the world and go to things like this. And our pets would be fine with our housemate. And then our housemate moved out long ago, and then he passed away. So we don't have a substitute. And the last few times I was in Quilt National, I conned my girlfriends, one girlfriend at a time, to going with me, and I'd pay all their expenses. But this time, those same girlfriends were not biting. So I had given up, and they surprised me. So I'm really excited. I'll be so happy to meet you both.
Yes.
And Holly. Holly, I just think you're an incredible director, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. That's really nice to hear.
You're very accessible and easy to work with. And you know your stuff.
I'm learning a lot from these talks.
I bet you are.
Well, Helen, would you like to tell us more about your piece in the series?
Sure, I'd love to. Holly, I'm going to have you keep the main image up for a while, and then I'm going to bravely try to screen share as I talk. And I'm going to set my timer to make sure that I'm not going to go over any of our time requirements.
Okay.
Because I love to talk about art. This is my 3rd time in Quilt National, and interestingly, all 3 of the entries were based around garments. The first was a pair of pants, the second a pile of men's white dress shirts, and this last is a cloak. my interest as an artist is in the lives of women. And something that kind of has been at the back of my mind, and I've talked with other artists about, is this idea of women as they get older becoming kind of invisible. And so what I had originally thought of was a series of invisibility quotes. And then a friend of mine sent me an online article from ArtsNet News. And the headline was this: experts in Pompeii have discovered a female sorcerer's mysterious arsenal of charms. Now, what's not to love about that? I thought that was such an interesting entry point. And my cloaks, in my mind, transformed into images of power, garments of resilience. And these innate wisdom and experience and knowledge that older women have that can mend, heal, repair, do many things. And so that's kind of where I headed. I decided to use small objects like the ones that they discovered in Pompeii as kind of an embedding element in these pieces. And I have 12 of them now, and I'm hoping to make another couple, maybe 2 or 3 more. These will be shown together in November of 2022 at the Visions Museum in San Diego, and I'm thrilled for that opportunity. I chose wool for this project, partly because of the protective qualities of wool and the idea of this cloak. And I have a huge collection of repurposed wool that I felt I needed to do something with. So this was a perfect marriage of what I had on hand and what I needed to tell my story. Mender of Rifts was made prior to the pandemic. Actually, I finished it. The photographs were taken maybe 2 days before the total shutdown in Indiana. And so I think that the riff that I was thinking about in this piece was centered around the elections. I was feeling a lot of angst and a lot of anxiety in our public life, and it was kind of transformed into this cloak. I'm gonna try the screen sharing right now, so that you can get a closer look at some of the elements in this piece. All right, so I want to go to, oops, sorry, back. I want to go to slideshow. Yep. From the beginning. There we go. Can everyone see that? Did I successfully achieve that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, good. This gives you a closer look at the wool and the density of the stitches. I used a lot of mending type of stitches, and also the needle is a plastic kids needle, and I couched that right onto the surface of the quilt. There's a whole bunch of those. There's a whole bunch of those, and those were pretty fun to do. I also did some needle felting, which was a new skill to me, and created areas of needle felting on this background. The background is a piece of handmade felt from Nepal that I'd had hanging around for about 10 years and hadn't really found a good purpose for. And it was wonderful to work with. And I kind of sliced it and embedded the blue shard shape throughout. Let me show you another detail of this. This is one of the small objects that I embedded. This is an ivory, or maybe it's fake ivory, spiral. And then you can see I did a little weaving and some very dense stitching. Most of the fibers that I used for the stitching are wool, and then I used some cotton pearl as well. Attached to the edge of the quilt are some beads and bone things. And in each of the quilts is a small kind of primitive needle that I made a facsimile of. and put in each of the quilts that I've made to kind of symbolize the ancient ones, the people that have gone before us, the women that have been mending and weaving and repairing and making a textile world that we are the inheritors of and hopefully the custodians of. And that's kind of the heart of this project, is this idea of this collective wisdom of women and the protective qualities that gives us. So, this was the first cloak in the series, and I wanted to talk about this a little bit because I think sometimes, and I don't know if other people are, if this happens to others, but sometimes I feel like the first piece in a series is where I'm doing most of the thinking and the problem solving. And that was certainly the case with this. This is called Finder and Keeper, and this was the first of the series. I learned that before I put the gauze background on the back, I should probably do the needle felting first. Because this one has kind of a furry back side where the needle felting kind of came through. So I discovered that. These are quite large, and this one is 60 inches across at least. And I'm not accustomed to working with a large format, so I had a lot to learn about that. The wool is very forgiving and doesn't require a lot of basting to keep everything together. So that was a plus, and I learned about that. I'm going to give you a close-up of this. You can see one of my handmade bone needles. I think they're pretty convincing, don't you? And there's also, buttons and pieces of glass and all kinds of things in this one that kind of represent the small wonders we encounter every day. And again, lots of needle felting, lots of stitching, just a pleasure to work with. I wanted to talk for a minute about why I chose wool and why I like to work with wool. There is just nothing like wool for that density of color. There's a color intensity in wool that just cannot be reproduced in another fiber. And I enjoy that so much. I also find wool pretty easy to stitch and very pleasurable to needle. All the work in these is hand stitched. And so I was working on these for, a good month and a half. And it's just a pleasure. Every stitch is a pleasure. And again, I'm experiencing the protective qualities of that mindful sort of slow down stitching, especially during troubled times. It was very helpful to me. I have been a regular attendee at these artist talks and have seen some pretty amazing studios. I am going to underwhelm you with mine. I live in a 100-year-old American Foursquare, smack in the middle of South Bend, Indiana. And we have 3 smallish bedrooms upstairs and something we call a half bedroom. It's 7 by 10. And it has 4 full-size southeast facing windows. It is full of light all during the day. I have a dining room table set up in the one end. I have a single bed set up on the other end. That's kind of my staging area. I have a dresser full of wool and a closet full of all my other stuff. I also have, there's a whole bunch of stuff under the bed too. That's also a story. I also have about 8 Rubbermaid tubs of materials in reserve in the basement. But this is sort of the place where I do my work. And this is how I organize my stuff on kind of a flat basket. I choose some things from my arsenal and then limit myself through space and those prior choices to kind of a palette of materials to work with. It's kind of self-limiting and probably good for my creative process. I also only work on one thing at a time. I'm thinking about the next piece, but I make sure that I finish it. So mostly because of time. Oh, there's my dinger. Thanks so much. I'm thrilled to be in this wonderful exhibit, to be with these wonderful artists today. And Holly, thanks so much for hosting. Oh, I'll stop screen sharing right now. Let's see if I can get back down. Uh, Stop share. There we go.
Great, thank you. Let's see. Hi, Linda. Let's hear about more about this piece and your artwork and yourself.
So I don't have, if you could just leave the screen on, I don't have anything prepared because I was already nervous as I was speaking today. So I didn't want to have to worry about that too. And I'm borrowing my husband's home office because my studio is such a mess. I would have been very, very embarrassed because yeah, I would have looked like a total slob, and that's not what I want to portray. But I try to organize a bit, but I didn't get very far. But this is my, it's funny to say my first Quilt National, because even just to say that still sounds unreal to me. Because I feel so honored, and I'm still in a bit of a disbelief because I only started doing fiber art, say 3-4 years ago. And before that, I spent a few years creating wood sculpture. So it's, and once I recently, once my wood sculpture started to look like quilts, I would cut up little pieces and literally piece them, glue them together, and they look like quilts. Or I was incorporating yarn and fabric, and I realized that I've always really liked textiles and fabrics, printed fabrics. Like I know it's really popular for a lot of artists to use solid colors, but I don't know, that just doesn't interest me at all. But to step further back, I actually didn't start taking art classes until I was in my 40s, when my kids were really small. That was kind of a outlet for me to get away from kids and do something for myself that's creative. And then realized I really like all these art courses, and that maybe I am a creative person. Didn't know before that. I went to school in California. I grew up in California. Well, technically I was born in South Korea, Seoul, sorry. And our family moved to the Southern California when I was 7. And I did my undergraduate in Santa Barbara, and then moved up to San Francisco after college. And while there, I even got an MBA. And so art and anything creative was never in my radar. I didn't grow up in a home where there was any arts or crafts. It was just work, go to college and make sure you get a good paying job. And so my 40s, when my younger one was 2, I think I was 40 at the time, and she started doing part-time schoolwork at the co-op. I had like 2 mornings, I remember specifically, it was like a Tuesday, Thursday morning, 9 to 11 or something, where I had free time to myself for the first time in years. And fortunately, just a couple miles from me, there was this beautiful art school. Well, the grounds is called Laguna Gloria, and had an art museum and a beautiful park setting with lake, and they had an art class, and that fit the schedule and happened to be drawing class, and that's what I took. And I'm like, hey, this isn't bad, I liked it. And then I took another one, painting, and on it went. And then I discovered sculpture, and now I'm rambling, I'm sorry. And so recently I realized I really like the textiles, but I never really thought that was an art medium because they didn't offer that at school. And I took these courses in Austin at Austin Community College. And so back to just 3-4 years ago is when I started making work with fiber and using recycled materials and things around the home is very important to me in my practice. That's why I made this piece with toilet paper rolls. And someone recently asked me where I got all those rolls to make the work. And it didn't occur to me that, oh, that people might be thinking about that, because this was during the time when you can find toilet paper at the markets. But my husband thinks I'm crazy, but I was saving toilet paper rolls for many years because it's something that I always thought I could make something out of instead of just throwing in the garbage can, or rather the recycling can. And a year before that, so like in 2019 or something, I did work on it and try to make something, but it just didn't work out and it wasn't going anywhere. So I put it aside and moved on making other things. And then in 2020 with the pandemic, there was a call for work by Sandra Sider for her book, Quarantine Quilts. And it was such a stressful, emotional, scary times that I wanted to make something that reflected the times, that was meaningful work. And so I pulled everything back out and started all over again. I basically just sketched a design, geometrics on graph paper with paper and pencil, and then just hand cut individual pieces. I don't know if you could tell, but every piece of the cardboard, the paper is directional. And so I was trying to make it interesting, create a pattern. The more you look at it, the more maybe you can see. And so that was my answer. I still have bags and bags of more toilet paper rolls, and I'm not sure if I will you do anything with it anytime soon, because I've learned that kind of hand cutting with a scissor was hard. There was a lot of hand fatigue trying to open up the thick, round paper and flatten it. And I had a little template that I created, outlined it with pencil, and then cutting individual pieces with scissor. There was a lot of hand fatigue. Anyways, so 2020, such a crazy, horrible year. It's still continuing. And before that, I've always created work that has always concerned me, things that were in my head, concerned me as a woman, as a parent, as an immigrant, as an American. I did a lot of work that deals with conservation and our natural environment, pollinators and works like that. And then, but 2020, I realized like I wanted to make work that was more immediate to what was going on in our world. And so this was the first piece addressing the pandemic. Right after this was the tumultuous summer with all the, after George Floyd's killing and Black Lives Matter. And so I made another piece addressing that called 1-3 in USA, and it speaks about mass incarceration of Black men, that 1 in 3 Black men in their lifetime will go to prison, which I find completely alarming. And that was fortunately accepted for the SACWA exhibit Connections coming up this fall in October at International Quilt Festival in Houston. And then after that, the next piece I made was, because it was in 2020, the centennial of the 19th Amendment, where women won the right to vote. I made a piece called Domesticity, addressing women and our place today in the home and the workplace, and that even though it's been 100 years, we are still in a gender inequality place. I forgot to mention that with this piece, sorry, I'm all over the place, TP Mania, fortunately, it was accepted for the book, Quarantine Quilts, which was awesome, but not accepted for the exhibit that toured. And so even though I was disappointed initially finding out that it wasn't accepted, I thought, okay, well, it was literally days before the deadline for Quilt Nationals, so I entered it, and it worked out so well for me. And I almost feel guilty that even though there was so much suffering in 2020, and like I said, it continues, that I created work that has been well received, and I've actually found success from my work during this horrible, horrible period. My other projects that I'm working on now, I just finished one that's addressing chickens. I love nature shows, and it was a show by Attenborough, and one of the numbers he threw out was that of all the birds in the world, only 30% are wild and 70% are chickens, domestic poultry. That just blew my mind. So I've been a piece speaking about that. And another one that I'm working on right now, because I like to use a lot of recycling materials, and I don't buy fabric. I use what I have around, or I am so thankful to people who donate to the free tables at the quilt guilds and the fiber artist guilds, because that's where I find all my materials. And one of the things I found was a bag, a Ziploc bag of over 300 2.5-inch square cotton pieces that I assume somebody, those were the leftovers after whatever she created. And so I'm working on something where I'm using all those pieces called, that one I'm titling One Patch Redux, thinking about the traditions of American patchworking, paying homage to that. And my goal is to use up every one of those 2.5 square fabric pieces I found in a new original design. I think I've spent more than 10 minutes.
Linda, thanks. I really love hearing your story and journey to making art and becoming an artist. I think that's really an inspiring story for people to start after you have children. You know, like you said, when you had a moment to yourself, just finding time to do something for yourself. That's wonderful. And look what it's led you to. Congratulations too on your other
Thank you.
inclusions and other shows in the book. That's great.
Thank you.
You're welcome. There was a couple questions about this piece. Did you plan where the bits of tissue appeared on this piece, like in the composition?
No, that would have been just, no, I didn't. Like I said, every piece has a direction. I don't know if you can tell it's either horizontal or vertical. And I was focused on that to make sure I don't screw it up, because I did, after I got most of it assembled, something in the middle, I realized, even though I check and recheck constantly, like I actually sewed it wrong, so I had to take that part apart. But I kind of I wanted it to look random and organic and not planned. I planned out the layout, but not where the tissue remnants fell. And after it was all done, kind of the along the in the image left side, there's like a big cluster. There's two pieces where it's mostly full of paper, and I thought about kind of tearing some of that, just so it doesn't stand out compared to the rest. But I thought, oh, let me leave it. It adds to, you know, the randomness.
Yeah.
Also, it's not anything precious material. I'm saying I wanted to show that this humble material can still be beautiful and impactful.
Yeah, great. Well, we'll move on to the next artist and then we'll come back with some more questions about this piece.
Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. Hi, good morning, Arturo. Arturo, could you unmute yourself? And we just lost your video. Or your camera, I mean. Arturo, can you let's see, can anyone see his video, his camera?
No.
No, okay, I can't either. Your video was working just a moment ago and now it turned off.
Tell him where the buttons are.
Oh, I don't know where the buttons are.
The buttons are, the microphone is in your bottom left corner on the black panel along the bottom of your screen below the Quilt National pictures. And the video is right next to that microphone. So they're both in the bottom left corner, Arturo. And there's a line through both of them if they're turned off. And if you click them, they'd come back on.
Oh, we see you, but I can't hear you.
I should be available. Hear me now?
Yep. Hi.
Turn up your sound on your computer.
That better?
A little better. Keep going. It's too quiet.
All I
Maybe you could sit closer to the mic when you talk.
good.
Yeah.
All right. So there's a box on my screen that says the host qualified.
Are you trying to screen share? Let's see. I think we're having a hard time hearing you.
Well, I'm here. You want me to start?
Sure. Yes. Hi.
Okay, good morning, and I apologize. I thought that I started a little later in the morning, and since my retirement, I don't get up so early. So here I am. I be alert, and I'd like to start, if I may, by talking about my artwork, the piece that is in the exhibition in 2020. At the very beginning of the year, I began a series which I'm currently working again on my creative portal, and it turned into a larger series than I intended. So with COVID happening and with Black Lives Matter happening, I decided that it would be important for me to make some commentary on both issues. So I stopped working on this creative portal series, and I began thinking about what to do with the COVID issue. So as I did my research online, I noticed that there were 22 cities at a certain point that were the most infected cities in the United States. And so I decided to use those 22 cities as my idea, and I started to work with in Chicago as the first main cities. So when I did that, I pulled up a map of the cities themselves, and I took their not state, but their city flags, and I embedded the flag into the perimeter of what the city on the map would represent. So as you're looking at the work, you can see for New York City, you see my cursor moving? You can see in New York that in the large image, left side, there's a dark blue that rolls into white with the symbol of New York City in the middle, that then continues to the right in orange. It goes up to the top of the artwork as well. So once I had the image overlaid on the map, I thought that where would I go from there? And I wanted to use the materials that I am known for, which are my 35 millimeter microfilm. And I decided that I would then print this image, the digital format, on a large scale, using what's called perforated vinyl. Perforated vinyl, as you can see in the detail, has all these little holes. And because I'm always interlacing my artwork, I took the image and I sliced it up into 2-inch elements. And you can see, if you look at the detail, there's a thin line where the microfilm is interlaced, those sliced areas, and I was able to weave or interlace the microfilm into the artwork. So in my studies, I did several different patterns, but I chose basically to go with a very simple pattern because of the complex math overlay. So once the piece got interlaced and sewn down, I realized that as I looked at these individual microfilm areas, I felt like a voyeur looking at someone's apartment. And so I thought, well, if that's the case, and because we're all confined at home during this period of the pandemic, I felt that confined cities would be a pretty good title for this artwork and the other artworks within the series. So confined cities in the age of COVID-19. This gave the title for the series, and this represents New York City. The funny thing occurred is that when I got the acceptance from Quilt National, they said they wanted Chicago, and then they said no, they wanted New York. So they had both visas for a while at the very back. And then I also entered Chicago in the Fantastic Fibers exhibition. So I was pleased that it got into that show. So both pieces were basically in two exhibits at the same time. So once I got into the exhibition for Quilt National, I realized that the Black Lives Matter was an important aspect of my work as well. And so I wanted to make something that was representative of both the police and the unarmed individuals who were shot. My brother hired from the Los Angeles Police Force, so I wanted to represent the police in that context because they do what they do, and there's always a bad apple in everything related to politics or the police forces or justice, period. And it seems that people of color are always picked on unfairly by all these political and police forces. But I wanted to also represent the police who were shot at the same period of time and honor them. So what I did is I took the basic police flag, which is black and white, with a blue line down the middle. And for that series, I basically used the star field for the number of officers I would build, star field, the number of unarmed Black individuals who were shot. But in the flag for the unarmed individuals, I inverted the police flag so that any flag that's inverted is a cry for help. So I used both of them, and I used for the Black areas memorial lace, and I used the names of all the individual white areas, so you can read them and entitled them, know their names. And I did 6 of them because it represented the years 2015 to 2020. So getting back to my COVID series, I want to know if there are any questions anybody can ask. I can answer them before I show my studio and office video. Any questions? No? Okay, so how do I show them my videos?
If you click, I think at the bottom of your screen, if you hover over the Zoom window, you should see screen share, a screen share option.
It's green.
So
Wonder if I can give you this.
started my video, but I don't see it on here.
It's a bright green button. It's the 4th one from the right on the bottom.
Sometimes the bottom menu disappears, so move your cursor down there to see if it'll come up.
Here, and it says desktop, but I don't have my I have it on in my photo file. My photo file.
You said it's on your phone or on your desktop?
Photo file. Photos. do I go to that?
No,
then?
you go to the Zoom window first and click screen share, and then it will give you the option to go to your photo file.
Basically, I just see desktop, whiteboard, iPhone.
Well, how about we move on to Susie and Arturo? Do you want to try and email me the video?
But it's too big.
Oh,
Oh,
So wait for me to go to photos. Well, hold on, here's one here. Here's the photo. Slide. Well, I'll start with the first video. Which is desktop.
we
Yeah.
can't see your screen.
Can't see my screen.
No.
Is that better?
No. Are you seeing the screen share option on Zoom?
Let's see. Oh, come on. I'm sorry.
oh.
Okay, 21 is, yeah.
Did you figure it out?
So it's weird, so,
Arturo, I think we'll have to move on to Susie, and then you can keep trying to find the correct link, and maybe I can even send you a quick picture through email of where it is.
That's a good idea.
Okay. So let's see. All right, Susie, would you like me to pull up the image of your quilt that's in this piece?
Yes, please.
Show.
Sticker.
Excuse me.
Okay, I'm Susan Shie, and I live in Worcester, Ohio, and this is my 14th, I think, Quilt National. And it was a real thrill to me because the last 2 times my work didn't get in, and I never expected to get in, but 2 times in a row for me was a hardship in my head. And I always work on my piece right up to the last minute, and then I diligently get it in before the deadline. So this time was the same. And anyhow, I'm really thrilled to be in the show. I'm happy I'm getting to come over the Labor Day weekend, and excited to see the show in person. So this is one of my Kitchen to Rose series pieces that I started the Kitchen to Rose series back in 1998. It's a 78 piece project because there's 78 cards in a tarot deck. And my deck is the Kitchen to Rose, so everything is oriented to kitchens instead of whatever the normal stuff is. And people, especially in my generation, a lot of baby boomers, artists have made tarot decks. And mine is the kitchen because the kitchen is what I consider the center of the home and where we nurture each other and where we're often gathering. So this piece started out, I think it was the last speaker who talked about making her piece for the show about the pandemic quilts, the coronavirus quilts. And I started this piece for that show, or it would have been bigger because this was as large as you were allowed to make your piece for that show, which kind of drove me nuts, but I wanted to do it. My pieces now are smaller than they used to be. They used to be like 60 inches tall and 90 inches wide. So they'd be these panoramas. And then over time, I broke both of my arms and my wrists and hands became a little weaker. And so the way I worked had to kind of shift, and I ended up really loving a square format that's 60 by 60. So I would have preferred having this piece a little wider, but it is what it is. So I missed the deadline for that. I wasn't finished with it. So I thought, okay, then I'll try putting it in Quilt National. So that's how it ended up being applied. It was my only entry. And I was so thrilled when it got in. It has a subtitle, but the title Annie and John refers to Annie Glenn, who is who was John Glenn, who was the first astronaut to orbit the Earth. And then he was an Ohio senator for many years. It's his wife. And John Prine is the other person that's John in this. And Annie and John both died of COVID early on in the pandemic. And there's another person in here that was our local Northeast Ohio weatherman that I'll show you later, who also died during that time. So that's the piece. And now I'm going to screen share. And I can do this. I practiced and practiced last night. So let's hope my practice pays off, because you have to get rid of this floating tools at the top, and I know how to bring them back. So the trick for me was that I'd get to this point and I would have those tools in the way, and I couldn't get to this little button up here to start my slideshow. And that's the trick. Ta-da! So this is the first sketch for this quilt. What I do is I make a lot of sketches usually, and then I end up not looking at the sketches when I draw on my big cloth with my airbrush and black paint. So John Prine, I really like his face here. It's a very sweet face. He is a folk singer who was really famous as a folk singer and kind of a bluesy folk singer. And he always sang songs about life. They're always stories. And I'm a story artist, visual artist. So I always have loved John Prine. And my husband, Jimmy Acord, is probably the person who introduced me to John Prine when I first met Jimmy back in 1976. I didn't know much about Annie Glenn. I just knew that she kind of reminded me of Jackie Kennedy, and she was that same generation. And she was always very quiet. I didn't know that she had a speech impediment. She had a stutter, and she overcame it when her husband became a senator. She had to work really hard with a speech therapist, and she overcame her stuttering. And then she went on in her life to do an awful lot of good work with other people, helping them overcome their stuttering problems. I put John Glenn kind of right behind her, standing on her shoulders here, because someone had said after she died that if it weren't for Annie Glenn, there would have been no John Glenn. And here's my second sketch. And I want to just say one more thing about them, is that they met when he was 1.5 years old and she was 3 years old, and their parents met at a card club in Ohio, in their little town. And every week, I think it was Concord, every week they would put these two little kids in the playpen and then they'd play their cards. So they had been together since they were little tiny children. They grew up together in school, they went to college together, and then they got married. And it's just a very sweet story. And I also thought that Annie reminded me of this other woman in this sketch who was our art center director here in Worcester for a long time and was a very loving person. And at this time I was using the title Love in the Time of Corona, which of course is a parody of Love in the Time of Cholera, and the book. And eventually other people started using the same idea. It just kind of caught on in the general thinking, I guess. And I didn't want to use that eventually, so that stopped being my thing. But in the one on the left here in the sketch, I have me between them at the top. And then on the one on the right, I switched over to the, she looks kind of like an angel there, but she's the statue. Oh, that's her arm going up. It's the Statue of Liberty, and that's what I kept. So now this is me working at the wall, and I'm using my airbrush, and I'm drawing on the wall freehand with black lines with my airbrush. I like to scare myself when I'm working. I think the adrenaline rush is excellent booster to keep you really focused and innovative. And so I up until the piece I just made just now, that's behind me on the wall here in my house, I was doing black airbrush lines for my original lines. And I have stopped doing that for now anyway, just because I'm a little less interested in thrill and a little more interested in getting things where I want them exactly. But this is me putting in more black after the basic people are in. You see I'm wearing a big respirator. That's a very serious industrial respirator with cushions inside the respirator cartridges, so that not only are you keeping gases out, but you're also keeping particles out, which is really important for airbrush. It's not hazing the room, but you just don't want any paint in your body because it's all heavy metals, among other things. So this is after I took off my respirator, and I wasn't trying to lean against the wall and look like a tough kid. It comes out kind of looking that way, but it's the relief of taking off the respirator because you get a little less air when you're in a respirator. So I was real happy to take it off. And you'll see on the wall here, to the right of John Prine, you'll see a little square on the wall, and that was my Quilt National, I mean, my SAQA entry for Studio Art Quilt Associates annual auction that I was starting and I was developing at the same time as this quilt. The quilt itself is ended up being like 61 inches high and 49 inches wide, and it would have been happier for me to have it be a square, but I couldn't. You can see it. You can see on the work wall here, which is a big sheet, that that there's an imprint from earlier quilts paintings that is the square, and that's the size that I'm working most of the time now. And over on the right, you will see a table, a bench that has little rags over things, and that's because our cats were young and they were crazy and they were biting things, and so I had to cover the airbrush when I wasn't using it, so it's covered with a washcloth, and so are the tools, so they won't get knocked on the floor. And you can see the compressor there on the floor. This is our new compressor, which means now it's probably about 6 years old, but they call it a quiet compressor, and it's much more quiet than a lot of compressors. And I named it Esperanza, which is hope in Spanish, and I absolutely love my compressor. And Jimmy uses this airbrush room also. This is my studio for airbrush painting. It's not my main studio, but it's the studio in between Jimmy's and mine. So it's like this decompression chamber, and we both use this wall. And when he airbrushes, he has to put up butcher paper to keep his leather dyes from rotting the fabric. That's my background. So this is, I'm starting to put in color, and I start with yellow usually because that's the, oh, I'm almost out of time. Oh, well, I'm using color. Here's the color, more color. There, I'm making a apron beside it. I'm going to airbrush to wear to the Juneteenth rally last year after George Floyd was killed. It's a big apron. I like to make protest aprons instead of signs. This is almost finished. I'm so sorry. Can I have a little more time, boss?
Sure.
I'm really sorry. I'll go really fast. I spent too much time before I got to the slides. So you can see here the subtitle of this piece is The 7 of Paring Knives in the Kitchen Tarot. And in the regular tarot, paring knives would be swords, but I don't like swords because they're violent. So I put my paring knives, which are kitchen tools to make food, I put them into palm trees, which I consider peace palms. So it's almost finished here, but it hasn't got the border on it yet. And now I'm using it, instead of using the airbrush for all the lines, I used to use an air pen, which puts paint through a surgical needle, but I switched over to these fine line acrylic paint markers because of my hands not being as strong for cleaning that syringe out every time I run out of paint. And what I mainly want to tell you now is that the border of this has John Lewis's letter to the New York Times. He wrote an op-ed letter before he died. John Lewis, the congressman from Georgia who died of cancer last year. He wrote this letter and asked them to publish it the morning of his funeral. And it's basically his pep talk for everybody about carrying on the civil rights movement. And I ended up writing probably 3/4 of that letter in the border the last day that the Quilt National entry was still open. And you can see the writing below that, it's in the quilt, is done with these paint markers. These are lines from a John Prine song, Make Me an Angel Who Flies from Montgomery. And the reason that I could not figure out who the angel from Montgomery in that song was. And I finally decided, not in the song, I'm sure, but in my mind, the angel from Montgomery is John Lewis, because he was born and lived near Montgomery when he was a child. His parents were sharecroppers. So John Prine's saying written on his head says, just give me one thing that I can hold on to. And that is a line in the song in the chorus. And to me, it's this op-ed letter. If anybody needs any kind of research about what to do about the civil rights movement or what to learn about it, just go find that, Google John Lewis op-ed letter to New York Times before his funeral. And there's red beads that are on each of their cheeks. I use beets a lot in my artwork. I use a lot of symbolisms that are personal, and that beets one is because beets are like women like them. They're underground, they're strong, and it has to do with persistence, with Elizabeth Warren's scolding from Mitch McConnell that she was warned and nevertheless she persisted. And that's what you have to do. Here's all some of the seven things, and there's the finished piece. Ta-da, I'm done. There's a lot of political stuff in it. There's a lot of history of the pandemic from the time it started. There's a lot of statistics, and the blue sky and the top has a letter that was published by a scientist named Franklin Veaux, V-E-A-U, who wrote very early in our pandemic about how people were saying only 1% of the world's people will probably die of this pandemic. It's no big deal. And he said, well, but 19 more people for each one that dies. 19 more will have terrible symptoms that last the rest of their lives. And he went on in this very article that I've written in full here, the number of people worldwide that would end up with respiratory illnesses that were terrible, heart illnesses that were terrible, memory problems, and just on and on and on, that would really scare the bejesus out of you. And you can find this article online by Franklin Veaux. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Now watch me get out of this. I gotta do
Thanks,
this.
Susie.
You're welcome. Ta-da.
What I love about your work are the layers and layers and layers of meaning that you include. And I like how you say that you use your own symbolism.
Yes.
I think that's so great. You're developing your own language. As
I
an
hadn't talked about the eyes. People often ask me about I have a throat and a brow eye on most of my people. And I even put them on Donald Trump because I feel like they have to do with connecting from our souls. And I believe everybody on a soul level is equal to everybody else in goodness. And we need to work hard at finding what's inside of us on that deep level and communicating with that love and equality from our the throat chakra, where this bottom eye is on my people, rules hearing and speaking. And so it's our communication center. And the third eye, you know, that goes back to the Hindus and the Buddhists, and that's has to do with going into your soul, into your subconscious. So that's been my symbol for those things for a long, long time.
Thanks, Susie. Arturo, did you figure out the screen sharing? Oh, you're muted.
I have both of them on my desktop, and
So what you'll have to do first is go to your Zoom program.
I wasn't sure. So,
Yep.
okay.
Click share screen, and then it will show you the option to click your video.
Shows me I'm on.
Do you have your video open? If you open your video and then click share screen.
This is my studio. I have built in 20
Oh, we hear the video.
silver sewing machines. Here's a rack for back braces and aprons. Here's my
Can you see it?
No.
I'll tell you.
Okay.
But I just don't see it coming up on this.
Well, do you want to tell us a little bit about your studio practice? Is that what the video was about?
No, the video was just my space. I was located inside. Technology. So,
Well,
you're telling me, and I get shares.
yeah, it doesn't seem to be working. Susie, we had a question. Have you finished a full deck of tarot cards?
No, I think I have about 8 of them left to go, and the piece behind me, of course, is one of them. I also have a slideshow of that. It's sitting here. I don't want to do it.
Could you quickly just tell us a little bit about the piece behind you?
Yeah, this is called Jomala, Joemala, and it's a combination of Joe and Kamala. And it's a celebration of them winning the presidency and the story of Biden picking his cabinet to people and a lot of women. And then when I got to the writing on it, and then the attack on the Capitol happened, I was really leery of writing about that. But at first I wrote really small about it. And then when I got to the border, I kind of exploded and wrote a whole bunch about it. And the Capitol was in it. See, it's there behind my shoulder. The Capitol was there the whole time. And I started the piece months before not months, but let me see. I started that piece December 10th, and I finished it February 13th. So the attack on the Capitol happened kind of in the middle, and I couldn't not talk about it. I had watched the whole thing, and I really had to talk about it. And the Capitol was sitting right there in my piece, so I thought it was kind of meant to be.
Yeah. Helen, we have a question for you. What other materials do you work in besides wool? I know you mentioned using men's t-shirts in a previous piece.
Actually, they were dress shirts, so they were woven. I use cotton and linen primarily in most of my things, but the clothes are all in wool.
And do you always use vintage materials?
Yeah, I prefer cloth that is passed through other hands. I think that gives it I don't know, some presence that I enjoy working with.
Yeah, I think I've told you this through email before. What I really like about your work is how you let the material be the material. You let that the fraying show and the aging of it show, and I think it's really successful. Arturo, I'm curious about your material that you're known for using. How did you discover or come about using the film in your quilting?
Well, initially, my pieces, when I began, with discarded material, and the discarded material from I have friends who were librarians. They mentioned that it everything. So they sent me boxes and boxes of these materials. And I just experimented. 1976, I was experimenting with discarded bank microfilm, which was only 16 millimeters. So the 35 millimeter gave me something that was a little bit more visually. So I really liked the graphic patterns that came out of my pattern fusion series. And then the motherboard series came out of that. That COVID introduced, as I said, they look like little apartments that now with voyeuristically looking into private spaces. Through the non-woven materials that I've always loved, mylar making, I introduced the microfilm and colored mylar. Expanded that body of work. I'm trying to get with this. I hear it, but when I share the screen.
Yeah, I'm not sure why it's not working. You know, two artists yesterday when we did a presentation weren't able to share either, so I don't know why. The settings allow it, but well, I have another question from Vicky who asks all of the artists, do you feel it's important to submit 3 works or the maximum amount of artworks to a show when you're submitting to Quilt National or to another exhibit? Or if you have one fabulous quilt, do you enter that one?
Because I juried for Quilt National, And I remember when people did that, we all looked at each other and said, I wish there were more pieces to look at by this artist so we could have a better decision making, factor. So I'm just saying, 3 is better than 1. That's my experience.
Well, for me, Quilt National, I did submit 2, which was the only time I submitted 2 for an entry. And I had mentioned before the TP Mania, only because it was accepted for something else, I threw it in there. And I'm so slow at creating my work. I do beat myself, I can't do it faster, but I do a lot of handwork and there's a lot of improvisational work. And so I literally barely complete 1 to enter it. And so everything that I've entered, for me, I've only gotten to enter 1.
Helen, I
And
saw
for
you
me, it's
shaking-
worked out. Yeah.
Yeah, it did. Helen, I saw you shaking your head.
I don't feel like 3 is always within my capabilities. So I think I've usually entered 2.
One time I was on a panel that Penny McMorris was on. Penny, for those of you who are younger and might not remember in the audience, Penny is probably our first art quilt historian. And she was on the panel and this question was asked. And she said, put in your best work, just put in 1 piece. And they all went, huh? And I sat there and I thought, I started out putting in 3 pieces when I was first entering Quilt National in 1987. And then I switched on my own choice to 1 piece because the work is tied up for a while, first of all. And then they got to the thing where they're not doing it now, but Quilt National had all these rules that you could not submit any work that had been shown anywhere else. It couldn't have been in a magazine or a book and all kinds of restrictions. So I wasn't going to have 3 new pieces that were abiding by those rules. And so I held with my 1 piece at a time. And like I said, the last 2 times I didn't get in, and they were both very political. And I started thinking, well, I guess political pieces don't get in. I guess they don't want their dairy barn burned down by the by the other side. But it really did scare me. But I thought, I'm not going to quit doing political work just because I'm not getting into shows. And that's me. I'll have my work. I can show it on Facebook. I can do this and that. But if I can't get into shows, I can't get into shows. So that's where I'm at. And that's the other reason I'm grateful that this one got in. But I think there's a lot of political stuff in this piece, but it's in the fine print, just like those sneaky contracts. It's not so much in the images.
Yeah, I think that's good generally. Just because you don't get into one show or Quilt National or multiple shows does not mean that you need to stop making your art. And I do hope that people are encouraged to keep making even when they don't get, the good, exciting news that maybe they were hoping for.
Can I add one more comment?
Yeah.
To that? One of the reasons that I enter usually, almost always just 1, is that I love that Sakwa for their entry process. You have 1,000 character limit because TP Mania was an exception where I only had like 2 sentences, but because I have so much to say, I write a lot and it's a lot of work for me to like get my point across, but get it down to 1,000 characters. And I appreciate Sakwa. I did get into 5 of their exhibitions, and that for each entry, you get to include an artist statement that up to 1,000 characters. But there's also a lot of other venues like Visions that I was disappointed at, where you have a 400 character limit. For me, like I can't condense and still convey my message. And also a lot of times they'll allow up to 3 artworks, but they give you 1 artist statement entry with you could be 1,000 characters or 6,000 characters. 600. And I find that frustrating because I have an artist statement for each work. So because of that, I could only enter 1.
That's
I wanted
interesting.
to say that I just should say that Quilt National is not doing that anymore. The thing I was complaining about not being able to have the work be shown online. Before you couldn't even put stuff on your website or your Facebook page showing the work in progress or details, and they took all that, you guys took all that away.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I was leading the fight to stop that when Hillary was doing it. And the next person, Kathleen, we had a lot of arguments on the phone because I wanted my rights and I wanted everybody's rights. But I'm just delighted that it's very, very open again now. And what are the restrictions now? Is it you can't be in other shows or
Yeah, the
book?
quilt cannot have been seen in a show or a publication prior to it opening in Quilt National, but it could still be included in other things once it opens at Quilt National. We just want it to be the premiere of that piece.
It could have been in a book, right? And you can show it on your website and you can show it on
Yeah. You can show it anywhere online and you can show it in a book or magazine or whatever after Quilt National opens.
Yeah, the argument we had was that we're helping publicize the show.
Yeah.
The images don't do it compared to seeing them in person.
Right. The new thing that came up during the 2020 submission process were the online exhibitions. And of course, that wasn't in our prospectus because that's never happened before. I mean, not on a large scale.
It was a video interview with that piece.
Right.
That's what it was. And you said, oh, we haven't even thought about that.
Yeah.
Because I think I asked you that before I did the interview, and I told you I wouldn't do it if you wouldn't allow that.
No, I think it's great. I think it's great for you and for the piece and for Quilt National. I do have a question for three of you have been in Quilt National multiple times. Arturo and Susie, I know you've been involved for quite a few years for a long time with Quilt National, and I'm curious what you've seen, how you've seen Quilt National change, evolve. Where do you think the future of contemporary quilting is going? Just any general thoughts for any of you, really.
Make a comment because I was first in Quilt National in 93. And then I didn't get in, and so I stopped submitting and just got into my own work and got into exhibition. But I got again in 2019, and then I got again in 2021. And I realized from 1993 to 2019 to 21 that I'd say the percentage of quilts that reflected the teachers of quilt artists had reduced in importance, meaning in 93 there may have been a lot of quilts that were based from traditional to maybe SDS educated submitters. But in 2021, I realized that the variety of quilts that were exhibited were more art-based in their theme instead of traditional pattern-based. And the diversity in this current show, to me, was very well accepted by the audience because we would not see necessarily pieces by many artists which were like photo representation or dealt with pictorial themes, unlike Susie, but even the other political piece of the piece, that wonderful humorous circular wheel with the figured round statement, that to me would not have been accepted previously. So I think this year's is much more visually diverse and less teacher taught. These artists came up with their own way of expressing themselves.
What I have really enjoyed over the years is going to the exhibition at the opening and meeting and then re-meeting people over and over again over time. Quilt National has created quite the international community of art quilters. And some of the younger people don't know, but art quilting really started as a feminist choice to include women's work, quote unquote, in with painting, to not be always painting on stretched canvas. And it was considered extremely radical when it started. Miriam Shapiro, who was worked with Judy Chicago in Caltech in California at a women's art class called Woman House. Miriam was an artist from New York, and she went around the country to different colleges, including mine, the College of Worcester, and doing artist residencies. And she'd sit there with you in your studio and she'd say, so how is this women's work? Do you consider yourself a woman artist? And my college was very, very, very active about feminism in general. And this really all resonated with me. So this was 1978. And I was painting on large canvases that I couldn't even get home because I didn't have a step van to move them in. And I just wanted to get off those stretcher bars and paint. So I started making things. I never thought of them as quilts. But as soon as I started stitching on canvas, which was too hard to sew through except with a great big needle, I wanted to switch to softer fabric, and I did. And eventually I wanted to stabilize it with layers and eventually with padding. So the term art quilts didn't come along until much later, like in the mid 80s. And women all over the country were doing this and thinking we were incredibly radical. And then the quilt world got just blown away by the real, the established art world, which said, well, I don't care, that's craft. That's not art. And, we're still living with the fact that our careers never took off like they would have if we were painting on canvas and had the reputations we have. So Quilt National has been a real bastion for elevating our work and us as artists into community and into giving us an international stage that we don't have in the art world that I really think we should have had. And that's not just women, that's people of all kinds of alternative everythings. It really is a radical thing. And you still see new articles about a quilt show that'll say, off the wall, or not your grandmother's quilt, or knock your socks off, and
Right.
crap, instead of talking about it as art. And I feel Quilt National talks about it as art, and that's very wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. Helen, I'm curious, how did you, coming into this series of the wisdom cloaks, and you said you first were thinking about them as invisibility cloaks, but now they're sort of a powerful garment, if you will. Could you talk about owning that and making it a power piece?
I think for me, it's easier for me to see positive and growth types of channels rather than be aggrieved or feel like I'm being left out. And so this idea of the invisible older woman kind of made way to more of the powerful, resilient woman with this ancient wisdom that has been passed down, that can be passed forward. And that fit me and fit my work pretty well. I also like the idea of that sorceress with her charms and her talismans and amulets. That's a very fascinating idea for me. These protective items that we might use in our lives today, whether they're imaginary, metaphorical, whatever. I think we all feel like we could use a little more protection.
I think so. And I have to tell you personally, your quilt has been really important to me. I've really, I think about it every Friday when I come on to this meeting with the different artists, because it's a challenge for me to be in front of people and talking and give myself that power. And I try and channel that wisdom that I don't yet have, that I'm learning, that I'm stepping into. And so thank you. I really do love your piece, and I find it really.
I'm so pleased. I'm so pleased to hear that.
Thanks. Yeah.
I love the concept. And I used to do a whole lot of hand stitching, and I wish I still could, but my fingertips are numb from all the hand stitching. So watch it.
Linda, I've seen multiple people come into the gallery and stare at your piece and say out loud, "What is that?"
I hope that's good. It's a
It is
good
good.
thing.
People are so I mean, sometimes people laugh, people are shocked or surprised when they read the materials list and realize, oh, I know exactly what that is.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, it's a really fun piece. And I think your work, your topical work that's of current issues is really strong and powerful and smart, and well done. And I think it also it has a layer of humor to it, talking about TP mania. And I think that's important right now for people to be able to laugh at ourselves a little when we're looking at art.
Thank you. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
We have about, excuse me, 8 minutes left. Artists, do you have questions for each other or comments?
I would like to let Helen know that when I saw her piece and that she won that prize, I said that's why it's so innovative and so different from any other material. I felt that she used leaving the torn pieces of tissue on there was so important to adding to the visual structure of the work.
Holly, could you paraphrase there a little bit? I'm having a real hard time hearing Arturo.
He said it was innovative, and then I missed the last half of the sentence.
It said, congratulations. Can you hear me?
Yes, get closer.
I'm literally on my computer. Apple, and I'm having difficulty sharing it. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Arturo, are you coming to the reception on Labor Day weekend?
I went to the opening and I'm coming back to the yes,
Good.
Okay, we'll all be there. Great.
Yeah, we can reconnect. That'll be great.
Yes.
That's really great.
I have a question, Linda. What would you say to the artists or the people who don't consider themselves artists, who are at the place where you were when you first took your first art class? What would you say to people wanting to become an artist, to be in Quilt National, or to learn about it? Just any thoughts?
Oh boy. I still have a hard time calling myself an artist. And I guess my advice would be, of course, try, because I almost didn't even, you won't know until you try. And I'm going to be self-effacing saying, if I can get in, anybody can do it, right? But I remember, like, I almost didn't even join SAQA. There was somebody who spoke about it, and she made some comments to make me feel like I'm going to be wasting my time and my money being involved with SAQA. So I almost didn't, but I did. And of course, I'm so glad, because the month I joined, I entered the Metamorphosis exhibit, and David Horning was the juror. When my work was accepted, my very first piece, I was like, holy cow. And then Martin Fletcher bought it at the International Quilt Festival. So I'm just blown away at my good fortune. And if I didn't take that leap and just try it, I wouldn't be where I'm at now. And it's hard for me to, like, I have no practice talking about my work, as you can tell. And I'm relatively private. And so it's hard for me to share, like, good news that I got. If I got into something like Quilt National, which is like so huge. And so something I'm trying to force myself to do is to, like, share good news, like actually pat myself on the back and talk to more people and call, like I said, like, don't feel weird calling yourself an artist. And part of it is because I don't get the positive feedback, but yes, go for it.
Yeah, own that title. You're an artist, and joining Sakwa, that's where we met, was that Sakwa meetup. You and I met there for the first time.
Yes, yes.
And I wanted to tell you, I went to Marvin's house a few weeks ago to hang some art, and we hung the piece that he bought that you just mentioned.
Yeah. And I feel like this is like for me such a full circle because that was 3 years ago when he bought it. He finally got it like this year. And then I'm actually was accepted into Quilt National, and I'm assuming I'll meet him because he lives there. And so in the 3 years, I've made this full circle that I just feel so fortunate. Like, and because of all these connections, I feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing and I'm at the right place. And even all these connections, even entering Quilt National, I wasn't sure if I should because it's such a huge, huge, prestigious exhibit. But I happened to watch one of the textile talks with the juror Bavor,
Nancy?
and it was also David Horning speaking, and her emphasizing how much she appreciates, like seeing the handwork and the slow stitch, which is a lot of what I do. And that encouraged me to go, okay, just try it, go for it. And just knowing that she was going to be a juror, maybe she might like what I do. And so once again, just going for it. And for me, there's been all these connections that I feel so, so grateful for.
That's great. Yeah, just go for it.
Yes. And don't listen to the naysayers.
I wanted, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I wanted to get back to what Susie Shie was saying, because she was painting. And when we hired a new museum director for our museum at the University of Kentucky, he came and saw a show that I installed in our gallery and said, well, your work comes from painting. And all these quilts that are current and Alsopua especially, everybody is coming from a painting base. Doesn't matter if you stitch on it by hand or machine. Doesn't matter. The main thing is that your ideas are based in 2D and they're expressive, whether they explore the decorative use of patterns or not, they're painting. And so, Helen, just remember, being an artist is a commitment that you do to your work. It's not something anybody pins on you. You pin it on yourself. And don't ever hesitate letting people know you're an art quilt artist or just an artist. Because that's what's so important, you know, whether it's 3D, 2D, performance art, it's all art and we're all creative.
I think we all need to realize too that it's a profession, and that if you say to a doctor, are you a doctor? They'd say, of course I'm a doctor. But for many years when people would say to me, who's the artist who did all the work in this house? And I'd say, oh, well, I painted it. I couldn't say I was an artist. And I started to think about that. And, you know, we are what we are. It's a job. And you know, being an artist doesn't mean you're saying I'm a genius. It just means you're saying you're an artist. And that's the first step to believing in yourself as an artist.
And I know how I feel. I'm not alone, because I remember reading something about, I forget the arts organization that did a survey, and 70% of Americans, whatever, people surveyed vastly support the arts, believe it's important, and society needs it. But then when they asked the question, do you support or respect artists? And only like 27% said yes. And so I'm like, wow, that's why I feel this way, right? Like sometimes I feel goofy saying I'm an artist. Because even though society wants art, like the artist, the whatever label and or the imagery or stereotypes, there's some negative connotations to it.
I think they think we're egotistical, because it should not sound like you're bragging. A doctor never gets accused of being a braggart when he says he's a doctor, you know, or a pianist or whatever, but an artist, and of course a pianist is an artist too. But yeah, I think they think we're vain.
And the same goes to, sorry, I cut you off, where I see so many articles where, and this came up briefly too, about the discussion about what's art versus craft, and are you an artist or a craft person? And there's so much of that. And I feel like, why? If I choose to call myself a crafts person, that's what I am. If I choose to call myself an artist, that's what it is. And I find it interesting that other people have such a strong opinion about, even though it's an opinion, how things should be labeled.
It is an opinion. You're right.
Yes. And don't make such a big deal of it.
Right.
If a person calls himself an artist, he, she is an artist.
When I was teaching in our program, because I started in 73 and retired in 2017, it took that long for the administration to give us a new building. We were not respected, because when I was hired, the art teachers were drug-based. And because of that, they didn't teach their classes very well. That they were after. And then it took us 44 years for the artists to be recognized, because we moved away from that and we moved into teaching and artistic work. And then we got a new building, because finally the administration saw that we were, and by student input, doing our job. So I understand, and it's the Arts Alliance that does those statistical, the database. But if you're not an Arts Alliance member, you should become one and help them, because they work with all the lobbyists and all the congressmen and senators in the government.
Thank you.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much for to each of you for your words of wisdom, your support of the arts and of each other and of Quilt National.
Thank you, Holly.
You're welcome. I think it's a great community that we're fostering here.
Me too.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for being here. And thanks for all of it. Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah.